and they got tons of information out of this channeled experience. This, I mean, you could you could call it a scientific program in their own rights, and they even refer to it as science, their own form of science, getting answers to questions that most people don't have access to because they were getting it from this higher dimensional source, being Ra. And once again, I've been listening to the book myself, and there are some very profound questions that were asked within the book in correspondence to this entity as Ra, and then the answers they received are very profound. And I've even checked in my own study and in my own observation with some of the answers that this entity was communicating back, which was Ra. I even checked to see the validity of some of these answers, and there's a lot of them that are actually historically true, which is very profound because, once again, the woman was operating as a channel for Ra. In the entire process, she was unconscious. So when she was in the act of channeling this message from Ra, she was not remembering what was coming out of her mouth and what questions were being asked. So the fact that she was able to channel these messages from Ra and have answers to things that were historically true that she shouldn't have answers to shows clear signs that she was actually in an authentic form of being a channel for this entity as Ra. Okay? So now with this context being drawn, this is obviously keeping it simple, keeping it right. In a nutshell, if you want to dive into your own studies with the subject, then you can purchase the book yourself and do your own research. Once again, it's not for everybody. It is definitely something that is, I would say, for people that are a little bit more advanced in regards to their spiritual studies and practices. And when I say advanced, I mean people that are taking it a little bit more seriously than the average person, because there's a lot of stuff that can fly right over people's heads that's shared within that book that a lot of people can easily write off as, no, that doesn't sound right. No, that's not true. That's not what science says in our today's time. I can't believe this. So it is what it is. Once again, if it's something that you are intuitively drawn towards, then you know where to go to find that information in regards to what I've been studying and what I'm going to be sharing on my YouTube channel. Okay? So in this context, the topic of our today's video, a social memory complex, this is something that I found extremely interesting that was mentioned within the book. And basically what it said was in regards to the entity as Ra, which once again, in the Egyptian culture, Ra was worshipped as a god, a specific aspect of source in its primal understanding. So in these different cultures, they had different entities, different gods, and things of that nature. And in the truth, all of these different aspects of entities that are the gods, they're all different aspects of the source, the infinite mind, okay, the everything, right? So in the book, Ra referred to itself as a social memory complex. So what exactly does that mean? Well, it explained itself as being a group of entities that exist in a different dimension, primarily the sixth density. That's what they call it, the sixth density, which is essentially a different type of dimension. And this group of entities that existed in this sixth density were aware of cosmic laws and were aware of we could say, the science of the source, which is the one, the infinite mind. I call it the source, and I'll refer to it in this video as the source. They were aware of the sciences of the source much more than the average human being on our planet that lives in our density. So here on planet Earth, we are primarily a third density planet that has recently shifted into a fourth density planet. So this Ra entity referred to itself as a social memory complex coming from a sixth density just said beings. So Ra was not a single entity as you might think, and as a lot of people think within the occult field. And I resonate with this. I can actually intuitively understand this because this is something that I've been able to notice in my personal experience with the occult field and how these different entities, energies, and even archetypes function in general. But as I was saying, Ra referred to itself as a group of beings that shared the same social memory complex, and this entire group of beings was known in our planetary sphere as Ra. So, for example, if, let's say, for example, I wanted to have communications with Ra, and I did some sort of ritual to try to invoke the energies of Ra so that I could telepathically communicate, it's not that if I successfully did this, I'm not communicating with just a single entity. Okay? I'm communicating with a social memory complex of a bunch of different entities that all share that same social memory complex and comprise itself in the name of Ra. Okay, so essentially, Ra is a group of entities that are similar. They are different, but are similar in nature and share a similar evolutionary role. Okay, that's literally what a social memory complex is. It's a shared memory of an evolutionary purpose that is similar to the species within, or to the entities within, I should say, that social memory complex. Okay? So, in our planetary sphere here on Earth, we are primarily within a fourth density planet as of right now. And when we try to communicate to these other groups of entities from a different density, we could say a higher density, the sixth density, there are different social memory complexes that take on form for us to be able to have the communication with these groups of entities. And that form is, in this case, Ra. So, as a human being, let's take it back to the Egyptian times. The Egyptians intuitively understood the name of Ra, and then they formulated that name into a god, basically a revered entity that they would consciously make contact with to get the energetic influences of what Ra had to give them. So in reality, a human might think, oh, I'm just contacting a single entity, Ra. There's only one Ra out there in the multiverse, and although there may be one Ra out there in the multiverse, obviously these are entities that they can communicate with multiple people at one time. If you know about invocations and you know about how entities work, that's how they function. I could do an invocation of Ra right now, and you could do an invocation of Ra right now, and if we both do it successfully, we can both have communication at the same time. So that already shows a different dimensional nature to these entities in general. But someone might think, and this is often the case for a lot of people, they think when they're communicating with a specific entity, they think there's only one of those entities that exists in the entirety of the multiverse. And the answer to that understanding is that that's not true whatsoever. In this case, when we're talking about Ra, Ra was referred to as a social memory complex. So when you're communicating with Ra, you're not necessarily communicating with a single entity. You're communicating with a social memory complex of consciousness that all comes together to formulate the entity of Ra, which is the communication method of how we on this planet communicate with this group of entities within that social memory complex. Okay, so that social memory complex, this group of entities that exists in a higher dimension, the sixth density, they all share that, once again, that same social memory complex. They share a similar evolutionary role, and they all refer to themselves as Ra. So every single one of those entities in their dimension, in their density, would be an aspect of that social memory complex known as raw. Okay, so there, to give you a visual, there could be hypothetically 20 entities that are all raw because they share that same social memory complex, and all 20 of those entities, with their portion